Welcome back, aliens. My name is Davin Reddy, and let's continue with the series on JavaScript. And in this video, we'll talk about this keyword. I know, that was pun intended. The thing is, this is actually a very simple concept, but then it takes some time for your brain to get used to it. So we'll divide this into two parts. So we have two videos actually. The first video will talk about what is this keyword, and the second video will talk about why it is called this keyword. Okay, then it will make much more sense. So if you remember the last example where we have created this object, so if you can see we have this object which is laptop, and then this laptop has some properties, right? Now this property, we have, let's say, CPU, RAM and brand, and then we created a method as well. So what is a method? Imagine an object having a property, but it adds a behavior. And we can add the behavior with the help of a function. And that behavior for an object is called a method. Okay, this is a method here. And then we are trying to call that method, right? So this is the simple thing we have done. And just to see what happens when you run this code, let's try. So let me run this code and you can see we got hello world. So I don't want to print hello world here. What I want to do is I want to print the values of the object, right? So the value we have here is, let's say, the CPU, RAM and brand. I want to print those things. And let's say not even with a function called greet or method called greet, I will say get config. So let's say if I have this method which is get config, and every time I call get config, it should print the configuration. So of course the method name here should also be get config, not greet. Now what do you think, will it work? Let's try. So what I will do now is I will just remove this part from here. And let me replace this with the help of the variables. Of course, we want to print the variables, right? Oh, the properties. So let me print CPU. And let's see what happens. If I try to print a variable CPU, and let's see what happens. And we got an error. It says the CPU is not defined. I know that's weird, right? CPU is defined there. It's here, but it is still not able to find it. Okay, maybe there's a problem with the variable outside the functions or method, right? Let's create a variable inside it. So I will say, let's storage. That's a variable I want to create. And let's say, I will say this is 100. And then here, let me print storage. Let's see if we can actually use a variable inside a function. I don't know if we have done that before, but let's try this time. So let's run this code and you can see we got 100. So that means there is no issue of using a variable or printing a variable inside a function. It is able to fetch this variable, which is storage, but not CPU. You know why? First of all, CPU is not a simple variable. It's a property of an object, right? So if you want to access that here, we need to do something else. We have to, let's type CPU. But then if you really understand this, CPU is not a part of the function here, right? It's a part of the object. It's an object property. In that case, you have to use the object name. So I will say, hey, this CPU belongs to an object and the object name is laptop. That's simple. So the object name, which is a laptop.cpu, let's see if that works. And that works. You can see that every time you want to use this property, you have to use a laptop name. Okay, this makes sense, right? But the problem is, see, you can have multiple objects, right? Let's say this can be laptop 1. Right, and then you can have laptop 2, then you can have laptop 3. There are different ways of creating object. This is one way of creating an object. You can create an object with the help of a class where you don't actually define an object like this. You don't say laptop 1 and then the properties, then laptop 2, then the properties. Of course, right? Laptop will have the same properties. Every laptop will have a CPU, they will have a RAM, it will have some brand, and it will have some function. Yeah, the value will change. They might have a different CPU, they might have different RAM, they might have different brand. But the point here is, when you try to use an object to call a property, using the laptop or the object name is not something you should go for. What is preferred is, instead of using the object name, we can say this. Now, what is this? So this means the object. So whatever the current object you're referring to, you might have multiple objects. You might have laptop 1, laptop 2. In fact, let me just try that. So I will say laptop 1, and then here let me just say laptop 1. And it should work, I guess. Oh, there's an error. The error is because of this laptop here. Then it should be laptop 1 as well. And let me run this code. And you can see we got I9. What if I have one more? Let me just create it on top so that it will not be in our focus. And let me just name this as laptop 2. And here also I will say laptop 2. But if I go down and if I say this CPU, I want it from laptop 1. And you can see we are talking about the actual object. We are using the name of the object. And it should work. There should not be an issue. But there is one more thing. What if you say this is i7 Okay, and here you're coming back and say this is laptop 2. So basically you wanted to refer to the same object, but since you have a choice, you went for another name, which is laptop 2, and let's see what happens. And you can see we got i7. We don't want that, right? We want this CPU to be the value coming from the same object. So it's always better, instead of using the object name, use this keyword. So this represents the current object. Okay, what is current object? So if you are in this method, who is calling this method? The laptop 1 is calling this method. So based on which method or which object is calling that method, it will refer this to that particular object. What I'm saying is, if you call this with laptop 2, now this will refer to laptop 2. Let's try, and you can see we got i7. It is happening because of this method here. So of course, when you call laptop2.getConfig, you will get this method here. So basically, always use this keyword. So what is this keyword? This represents the current object. So if you want to access any of the property of an object, it's always better to use this keyword. But why exactly this keyword? Why not something else? That we'll see in the next video. So I hope you are enjoying this series. Let me know in the comment section and do subscribe for further videos. Bye bye.